Hello, hello, hello. I'm live. This is my first time. Can y'all hear me? This is my first time going live from the actual YouTube interface in a very long time. So I'm still trying to find my way around here. If anyone happens to tune in as I'm going live, um, let me know in the chat if you can hear me. And because I'm also using my AirPods instead of my microphone. But I want to go ahead and get started. It's 8:50. I'm about 20 minutes late, and that's kind of what I want to get into first. But I would also like to welcome you to the discussion. This is part of the Unlearning Anti-Blackness Book Club book selection. We are reading, or we're done reading as of now, The Color of Compromise by Jamar Tisby. This book is a must read, especially if you identify as Christian, and you are interested in unlearning anti Blackness and learning what anti Blackness even is, how it shows up. This is a must read because it goes into it from a religious perspective, in a way that we don't really see often, which we've talked about a lot throughout these discussions. Um, so yeah, this is the last discussion of the book, and it's kind of bittersweet because there's so much that was covered that I feel like, once a week for 4 weeks is just not enough time. And then I took off last week so that people could kind of catch up, those who were reading, because we kind of dwindled in terms of participation toward the end. So I wanted to give people an opportunity to catch up and read. So yeah, it's a little bittersweet to be doing this last discussion for this book now. I'm going to another screen really quickly so I can share in our Facebook group that I'm live in case anyone wants to join. I'm just going to let them know because normally I go live on Facebook and YouTube simultaneously, but I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it right now. So I gotta let people know. So give me just a second to do that. If you're watching um, and reading, let me know what your closing thoughts are on the book. What did you think about it? And kind of what are some things that you now view differently, or ways that your thoughts have changed, just how it has impacted your life. Please make sure you share that in the comment section. And if you haven't been reading but you've been following along with the discussions, let me know there too. So I'm here on Facebook. Let me let them know that I'm live. I got this crazy picture of me. So I know the lights are dim. Listen, this is usually around it's so much going on at this time of night for us at home, and it's something that I want to kind of talk about before we jump into the content of the book. But I've been trying this time around. So this is the second book that we as a book club have read together. With the first book, I did daytime discussions because my children are at daycare. My husband is usually gone. I have the house to myself, and I don't have to worry about outside factors that I haven't scheduled or anything like that. Well, that works because I was the only person participating. With this book, there were others. Many of you came on board to participate and read along. And so I wanted to adjust the discussions because they were live. I've always done these as live streams for the most part. and I wanted to do it during a time that was better for most people, but it just don't work for me. So I'm not going to. This is my fix. So don't really have strong enough membership in the book club to go with what's best for the group, because people are in and out, they're reading it. So I may wait and do a discussion and nobody watches it. But then on the other hand, I don't have to necessarily do them live. So I could pre-record them during the day and run them as live so that people can still chat and interact. So I think that I'm going to do a combination of that. So for the ones that I really want to be live, I'll do them for the time that best works for me. And then the others I will pre-record and run them as lives. Or I may just pre-record them and post them. I don't know. I'll just have to see how it goes. But I do know that live videos in the evening at the 8:30ish, between the 7 to the 9 mark, just don't really work for me. They have to be a lot later. And by that time I don't want to be on live. So I'm gonna be adjusting that. I'm gonna just switch up the whole strategy with the next book, and also implement a lot of new things as well, just to make this more engaging. I'm really trying to like pull out the conversation and pull out the perspectives. So I'm just trying new things. So, and I'm open to suggestions. If you have any, please share them with me. If you're watching, please like the video. If you have not subscribed to my channel, do that as well. There is a separate channel for the book club. I'm live right now on my channel just because it's the one that's always open. But I will download this video and upload it there so it's still there. Next announcement is I'm gonna do a book every other month. And the reason being is that this type of content can be really heavy. So it's important to have a balance. And take it that most people who read a lot and read and participate in book clubs do it in more than one. So if you have another book club that you're a part of, I want to give you space to read those books and participate in that. So I'll be doing a book every other month, and the next one will be in August, and I'll let everybody know. But last announcement, if you want to volunteer for the book club, if you have something to contribute in the area of social media, particularly the Facebook group, and really building that up, and also planning some of the event planning. I've mentioned wanting to do conferences, wanting to do events and panel discussions in person. So I'm really going to work a lot on that going into 2022 in the latter part of this year, since the world is opening up. But let's get into the book. So this is the last discussion. So we're going to be talking about the last two chapters, mainly chapter 10. Um, just because I just finished reading it. But also because there were a lot of things that I think deserve to be talked about from chapter 10. And chapter 11 is pretty much advice for you and for people who are looking, like, what's the next step? How can we advocate? How can we shed more light on this issue? Chapter 11 kind of deals with it. So I want to focus more on 10. And I have my underlinings here. So I'm just going to go based off of that. I didn't do a huge outline like I normally do. So chapter 10 begins on page 172, and it opens with the Southern Baptist Convention and how like most things in America, it has racist roots. And the author of the book, Jamar Tisby, he's been doing a lot of posts about the Southern Baptist Convention, but I have to admit, like, I haven't really looked into them or into that. But I thought it was interesting that they made this resolution to basically say, like, hey, I know we used to support slave owners back in the day, but we apologize and we ask the African American community to forgive us, and we promise that we're going to eradicate racism. We're going to work toward eradicating racism. And it's just so funny to me that so many organizations, they have these moments of, I guess, empathy for the Black social justice movements, the just the racial movement in general, the Black movement, the Black rights, whatever you want to call it. And yet here we are. And that doesn't just go for the Southern Baptist Convention. That goes for the NAACP, the Congressional Black Caucus, the Divine Nine, sororities and fraternities. Although their mission isn't necessarily to eradicate racism, it is a Black organization. We have all of these organizations and all of these people who have made these pledges, yet we find ourselves in the same position. So, like, we know it's been a buzzword. We know it's known that it's been like the thing to do or the thing to say. And we see that no progress is happening, but we're still very reluctant to kind of call these things out and really just say, look, okay, this is not a PR statement. Let's just get down to the real. This is what's going on and this is what needs to happen. We can't just give the lip service. Um, so I just thought it was interesting that they would have this resolution and that we see that they're still having issues among their organization. And it goes directly into, I'm gonna skip over to the next page 175. It goes directly into the evangelicals and how they diminish racism to these individual events, or that, there was a lot of individualism in it and not really acknowledging the system, the machine behind the racism. And I think that's just what that is. That's the same situation. Um, Now I thought it was also interesting in here that he mentioned intentional multi-ethnic churches, because that was the last church that I was part of. It was a multi-ethnic church and it was done so intentionally. And, having been in that environment, is like, I get it. I get it. As Christians, we are to be one. But my thing has always been, if you're not really dealing with the reality of the differences, the reality of life for all the ethnicities, when they come into church, then it's superficial. It's putting a band-aid on the wound. So as a Black person, if I'm going to church and I'm going to this multi-ethnic church because I feel like from a belief and faith standpoint that that's what I should be doing, I should be intentionally interacting with other people. What does it matter if you're at a multi-ethnic church if it's just more of the same? If it's just a mirror of society, if it's not actual groundwork being done, organizing being done. You look at the Black church, and historically, the Black church has been like a force of advocacy. For my whole life, I attended Black churches, and the pastors were not shy about talking about issues, political issues outside of what all Christian churches talk about, like gay marriage and abortion. These pastors were talking about race because, we were all Black. But what does that look like in a multi ethnic church? What does it look like to advocate for your Black congregants? I mean, we know that there are other ethnicities than Black, but this book club is about unlearning anti Blackness, because the problem is anti Blackness. It's nothing else. But what what does that look like in that arena? And why does it not happen? You get, like, I'm trying to, like, paint a picture of just how it just really doesn't make sense. And I think it's not just even about, like, from a race standpoint, it's just the way that churches have become watered down, but more loud, if that makes sense. Like with social media, churches are everywhere. Pastors, you have mega church pastors, celebrity pastors who are just always out there in your face preaching a message. But if it's not specifically about how they feel the congregation or the members or the believers should be living their lives, which is what they should be talking about, it doesn't bring in the realities. And I think like a lot of pastors, they craft sermons based off of, sometimes it's feel good messages, sometimes it's messages meant to really shape you, but it doesn't really touch the issues. It's still all individual. And that's not something that you just see in evangelical churches. That's something that you see just across the board with church, period. And how it's not really preaching the gospel, so to speak. It's not really taking this word that is living, as they say, taking this word, this living word, these scriptures, and applying them to the different issues and realities we face, and actually using that to create strategies and create policy and create campaigns. Like it's a lot of emptiness, like it gives people a lot of room to get away from the real work. If that makes sense. I hope that makes sense. Mason is crying because he can't come in here with me. And they kind of threw me off, but I'm just trying to make a point about how we're we're in church and we're in the multi-ethnic church. Great. But we still ain't doing nothing. We're still not making a change, like a fundamental societal change. And I just feel like that does a disservice to the God that we serve, that we are so timid collectively in these issues when we should be at the forefront. So I just thought that it was interesting that people would be intentional about creating multi-ethnic churches, but not intentional about programs to actually serve these groups and facilitating conversations to serve these groups. It just looks like a marketing ploy, and it feels like that too. um I see somebody's watching on YouTube. I don't know who you are, but feel free to say something, chime in. I have everything here, but ain't nobody commenting, so I'm just speaking my thoughts so I can be done with this. I know this is not how I should approach it, but it's late and I just want I'm doing this for accountability to say that I did it and I pushed through and I completed it. Um so other he touched on how people unknowingly compromise with racism. That's something that we've been talking about, but I really liked how he put it. Like I was eager to get to this part of the book because we have the examples that we're actually living in. So you can't say, America has dealt with its racist past and, we're moving forward. We have these laws in place. Black people, y'all still crying. Y'all ain't never happy. Like, I love that he shows these modern day, present day examples of how this compromising is still going on. Um, he talks about Black Lives Matter. And I didn't know this about Black Lives Matter, um, which, well, we'll talk about that in a second. But I didn't know that. I knew that Trayvon Martin's death, his murder, was the birth of it, but I didn't know that Mike Brown kind of kicked it into full gear. I don't remember. Well, I mean, I remember Ferguson happening, but I wasn't watching Black Lives Matter be shaped. Like it was just like one day for me, I saw it everywhere, but Mike Brown is so crazy that he talks about Mike Brown's death because that marked a turning point in my life, like personally, from and in my career. When Mike Brown was killed, it was, I included this like in, or I took it on as part of my career. So I work in media. I'm a communications consultant. I create content. I've done this since I was in undergrad. That was when I first started practicing it on my own independently as a freelancer. So 2009ish, I've been doing this, working in the media, websites, blogging, social media, all of that. And on the other side of that, I do have formal media training. I have a bachelor's in mass communication, a master's in public relations and mass comm. And when Mike Brown was killed, I figured out what I wanted to do with my career. And I wanted to talk about racial issues. I wanted to advocate for the Black community, but I wanted to do it in a way that included the media as a huge part of it. I wanted to talk really honestly, like this is me nerding completely out. I wanted to create a theory about how, maybe I shouldn't say this because I did not complete my doctoral program. So I could still kind of use this for my dissertation. So I ain't gonna put it all the way out there. I will just say that Mike Brown's death, just like George Floyd's, marked a turning point in my life and my career. And that's how serious these things are for anybody who may be watching that isn't a Black person, that these issues affect us and impact us so much that it could change the course of my career and change what I felt like was my purpose. I was always in the area of my purpose, but when that happened, it was like it clicked. Like, this is what I'm supposed to be doing, talking about these issues and highlighting them, using the media and showing how much the media is a part of this, as it is just the whole idea that it exists in the first place. So Mike Brown, rest in peace. His death was really, really, um, it just really impacted me in a major way. And so just every time I see his name and I read about his situation, I think about Ferguson. I just remember where I was and how I guess real racism became, how like that this can happen on camera and the officer still walks. With Derek Chauvin, who killed George Floyd, it ain't walking. But that's not the rule. That's definitely the exception in these kind of cases. But moving on to page 180, when he talks about Christian responses to Black Lives Matter. And this was very interesting to me. And it kind of like, it does illustrate something that I said before, that the American evangelical church has not ever formed a movement for Black people. It does not, the church as a body has never done that. It's always been pockets. It's always been Black people who have separated and started these movements, or who were separate to begin with in a Black church. And to me, that's very telling. It's very telling. And I think that we should evaluate, as Black people, as Black Christians, where we worship and really take that seriously. And this is a whole different rant that I'll talk about, I'm sure, when I get my life together and start making content, because I've been kind of just chilling lately. But I think that it's worth having a conversation about Black people separating, deciding that we are going to unify together in our ways, you know, economically, from a religious standpoint, as family units, as neighborhoods, as cities. And we're going to figure this out for us. And just not really, like, it sounds like segregation, because it probably is, but it goes back to like Dr. King realizing that pushing for integration and pushing for inclusion in these spaces was not the answer. And I think that, like, looking back, we can all say that, like, integration, that wasn't it. And I think of multi-ethnic churches intentional, especially when they're led by Black people. I think that for me, it's a social thing. It's not about like you're intentionally putting together a multi-ethnic church. Your intent ain't got nothing to do with the actual dynamic of the group. It's a social thing. It's to say, hey, we can all exist, but coexist. But if we're coexisting and it's superficial and it's surface level and the racism is covert and it's very subtle, like he talks about, then like what are you really doing? It's just a band-aid. It's not a treatment, it's a band-aid, it's optics. That it has to be more than just because the Bible says that we should be worshiping together. This day and time, like I don't see how this acceptable for anyone. I just don't. Hey, YOLO. Hi. Thank you for tuning in. I see you in the chat. Um, I love his statement on page 181 about being complicit only requires a muted response in the face of injustice or uncritical support of the status quo. That was like, in a nutshell, what I have been saying and what I've been complaining about with my former church, that it wasn't that things were done on purpose. It was the fact that things happened or a theme emerged and it was cool, and we just act like it wasn't a thing or like it's not important or that just because it mattering to one or two people is not enough to address it, that it has to be an individual thing. It's just no, you can be complicit when you're not dealing with whatever the issue is. Like you just like, okay, I acknowledge it, moving on. No, you have to actually deal with it, otherwise you're being complicit. And I feel like this is probably the chapter that really ruffled a lot of folks' feathers with this book because you can't escape it. You're going to find yourself on one end of the spectrum. If you are a believer, if you are a Christian and you read this book, whether you're Black or white, chapter 10 is kind of where you figure out what side you've been on. And for some people, they don't like the way the truth feels. And I think that this might have been a chapter that, got him in a little trouble with some of the evangelical whites that were reading it. Let's see, what else did I want to talk about? I kind of talk about, oh yeah, so I'll close on it on this one. On page 184, he's in the last paragraph, he says he's talking about how white Christians have failed and failed for a long time at acknowledging ongoing discrimination and racism in systems and structures. And so Black and white Christians often talk past each other. This is what he said. I'm paraphrasing. So he says that one group focuses on isolated incidents while the other group sees a pattern of injustice. And he says that to properly assess and move toward a solution to racism in America, both perspectives are needed. And I disagree. I'm like, huh? I don't think that, one, I don't believe in racial reconciliation. I've said that before. I think I said that in the very first stream, the very first discussion of this book. Racial reconciliation is not a thing. It is not real. It will never happen because races have never, in terms of Black and white, the Black race and the white race have never been good. So you can't reconcile something that's never been good because you don't have a point of reference. So racial reconciliation is not real. It's not a thing. You can't do it. So now that that's out the way, when he says that, like, I don't need a white person to acknowledge that discrimination in systems and structures are happening. Like I need I'm empowered enough that I have read and I know the facts and I've lived and experienced it. Therefore, whether or not someone acknowledges it, that doesn't change that it's a fact. So that's number one. Number two, I guess this is kind of what people are saying about like Juneteenth, that people were just happy to be not Juneteenth, the Tulsa race massacre, how Joe Biden visited Tulsa. He was the first president to do that. How, if Obama was before him, tell you all you need to know about Obama, but I ain't gonna go there. People were just so happy that Joe Biden acknowledged it, that for the first time in ever, people were acknowledging Tulsa and finally talking about it. People were happy with it. And they should have been offended that the acknowledgement came without a redress, without action, without reparations, that these people are living survivors of this massacre, and you gave them a OKC jersey and Jordan. That's a problem. So it's not just acknowledgement. Like we just need the laws to change. There are black people in office. We Benny Thompson done been in office forever, representing Mississippi. We have people in place that can push for these policies. We don't need acknowledgement. It's a fact. We have the proof. We need the action. So I just didn't like that word, but that's probably me being nitpicky, whatever. Um, but I also don't think that both perspectives are needed. Like, I don't need the perspective of a white person to have a conversation about race. Like, no, like, respectfully, I don't need to hear your perspective. I don't really care at this point. Like, I used to, when I made a video on my channel a year ago, maybe older, about how I got saved. And it's like, looking back, it's so cringy because I was still like, still trying to, I was uplift suasioning my own religion, but whatever, I stand by it because it really happened. But I became friends with a white woman, and we would have a lot of conversations about race, and like we eventually went there. Like our conversations eventually led us there. And I think that all of that had to happen. That's why, as cringy as it is, as I look back on it, and like, I don't think that anymore. My thoughts have changed. Just the whole situation is that, just as a whole, I knew that it was divine. So I still stand by it and appreciate that experience. But going into it, having a conversation with her about race and what I have lived and experienced and seen and know, I didn't need to know her perspective. Like, again, respectfully, I didn't, because what I was saying, what I say, what I speak about in terms of this issue are facts. So, and the facts are also that Christians have compromised with this. So that, like what that means. That means people either don't believe it, they don't know, whatever. But I don't need to hear somebody's perspective on that. I don't need to hear, like, I think, and the reason why I'm saying that is because the final thing for me at my former church was the group that they tried to put together. It was to me, like a PR thing, this race group. And it I talk about this all the time, invite only racial group. But I found myself, as I'm hearing them talk, hearing these white people talk, the microaggressions, the things that they're saying, like, as they're laughing, like I'm having to cut my camera off because I'm in tears, and that's just not something that is healthy, and it don't do nothing for the issue. I don't want to hear that. Like, I don't need to know how you feel about something being a fact, and a fact being that it needs to change. Like, so, and maybe I'm not articulating it right. I don't have all the words. I would have to kind of, like, I have to try to talk about these in more detail from what I've experienced that makes me feel this way. But just for right now with the discussion, I don't see how to properly assess and move toward a solution to racism in America. Both perspectives are needed. I don't see how, because the data, the numbers, life shows us that this exists. We know what it is. We got the documentation, the papers, the studies, the research. We know what it is. I don't need your perspective on it. Like, what do you have to say to this? To the black person that lives it, and has lived it generationally. I don't understand what he meant. And I pray that I would get to interview him and kind of talk to him about that, because I'm still, as I'm talking about it now, like, I don't even have all the right words. I feel like I'm all over the place because I'm just not understanding. If you help me out, we got two more people watching the stream. What do you think he meant by that? And do, like, help me work that out, because I'm just not seeing it. Um, he goes on to talk about the election, talks about Trump. And I think Trump was a big deal for a lot of black folks in these ethnic churches, and definitely for me, because, and I express this, I've talked about this a lot. Like, you can't worship the same God I worship and vote for him. Like, you take all of the person. You can't just take part of it. You have to take it all. Like my husband, I'm married to him. Y'all know that TikTok. That's my man. And I'm gonna stand beside him. Like, I have to take all of him. I can't just say, "Oh, I'm married to the parts that I like." I have to take all of him. And it's the same with Trump. Like, you're sitting in church, you can't just say, "Oh, well, I like his stance on immigration," or "I like it." No, you have to accept all of him. And I think also this is this is probably something that happens in the white space, the white world too. But I feel like we forget the power that we have, and we have bought into this notion that we're powerless against the government. That like, we're if you look at America, and this is like one of my woke spills, so I ain't gonna go all into it. And I mean woke is in how it originally was, not this gentrified version of woke. But Mason just got in trouble. My baby been trying to get in here to me. But he made me lose my train of thought. I'm going on my woke thing. But we're more powerful than we realize. We can send messages. We can take a stand. People are just afraid to ruffle feathers, and that in I see it every day, and I'm like, y'all can't really be believing this. You can't really think like this. And it's like what Kwame Brown like has been saying about this go along, get along gang. A lot of people just go along. Even if there are only two presidential candidates, you don't have to vote for one of them if you don't want them. You could skip that. You could write in somebody. So what if it does something to the numbers? Who cares? It's about having that own agency over yourself and making your own decisions. You don't have to do what a group does. And I think that's how we should approach everything in life, just being independent, being free thinkers, and deciding for ourselves and not being afraid to do that. I don't think that God would make us and create us with the capacity to think and draw our own conclusions based off things that we see, for us to just go along with the group. Like, I just don't believe that no, I just can't believe it. Um, so that's about it. I'm gonna end it here. Again, I basically just covered chapter 10. Um, let's see. What else do I have on here? Oh, I made a note about, he talked about evangelical support of Trump being illogical, just like racism is illogical. It just does not make sense. That's what leads me to believe. I firmly believe that white supremacy and racism is an evil spirit. It's a demonic spirit. It's one of the fallen angels, one of these demons. That's their spirit, and they got it on a lot of people, and it has completely covered the globe because you don't just see it here in America. It's illogical. And when something is illogical and you can't explain it and you can't get that person to see it, that's possession. Period. Um, and oh yeah, so another reason why a lot of evangelicals back Trump is because they knew that he would pack the court with Supreme Court justices who were conservative and would promote his policy and his beliefs. And that's why, for me, it was like, how are we in church and some of like y'all voting for Trump and he's doing this, and you know that this policy is going to affect these people? It's the same racism as when people were getting lynched in the Jim Crow era. It's the same. It just looks different, and because Black folks are not hanging from the tree, doesn't mean that it's not real or that it doesn't exist. Uh, so so on page 189, um, this is so good because I saw this in my research. Like when I was making a decision about whether I wanted to read this book and bring it to the book club and put it out there as a group reading, I kind of saw this theme emerge from my research. But he mentioned how Christians feel, well, 57% of evangelical Christians thought that Christians face a lot of discrimination. I thought that was really interesting because I'm seeing a theme emerge now among even young Black Christians where they feel like people who are outspoken against some of the problems within Christianity, some of the problematic Christian ways or problematic Christian practices that they believe to be problematic. I'm not saying they're problematic, that they believe, such as the homophobia in the church, um, just the struggle theology, like Black folks always struggling and sick and pain, and then the misogyny in the church, the patriarchy. They have issues with that. And so what I've been seeing is when people speak out about that, a lot of young Christians and Black ones are starting to say, y'all only pick on Christians. Y'all don't do this to other faiths. Y'all don't say this about other faiths. So I thought that was interesting. And that's something that I want to explore. But that's all I have for the book. This was not just the way I envisioned the last discussion being, but again, this is for accountability to say, I did it. I followed through. I did something I said I was going to do. I did it. I did it. And thank all of y'all, everybody who has read this book with the book club, the UABBC, who are in the Facebook group, subscribe to the channel. Thank y'all so much for your participation. The next book selection will be announced later this month and we will start in August. Um, Again, we're going to take a month to read a book and then read and discuss a book. I know this is fast paced, but hey, that's what I see other book clubs doing. So until I have a larger club, this is how I'm doing it. We're gonna do a book for a month and then we'll take a break and focus on the other side of the unlearning movement. So this book club is the Unlearning Anti-Blackness Book Club. By now, you know what it is, you know why it exists. But the other side of this is the actual unlearning movement, which was like the first thing that God told me to do. And so much has changed since I started that movement, and a lot of personal growth and development has taken place. So I'm really excited to kind of switch my focus back to that and talk more about things that I've had to unlearn, things that I'm still unlearning, and just some topics that we need to discuss that people just don't discuss enough. So I hope you'll join me for that as well and meet me back in August for our next book. I'm going to announce it first on Patreon, then in a Facebook group and other platforms. So if you like to support this book club and make monthly contributions as little as $3, feel free. Please join the Patreon. Your support means a lot. It helps me to create more content and to do things in the future. I'm actually going to set a milestone. I guess I'll do a public milestone of one of the things that I'm working on. It's I guess I've got it kind of planned out enough to say, hey, we're doing this and we need this many people to support it so it can get done. I think I'm about to do go ahead and launch that soon. So be on the lookout. Thank y'all again for watching. Thank you for tuning in. On your way out, please like the video and share it with someone or someone's people that you think would find this beneficial. I hope y'all enjoyed my vibe. We put up some lights in our room. And I just thought it would be cool to do a night discussion like this. And I also didn't want to spend too much time trying to set everything up. So on that note, it's 9:30. My husband and kids are waiting on me. So I'm going to switch into mommy and wife mode. And I hope you all have a good night. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel and to the Unlearning Anti-Blackness Book Club on YouTube. Thank y'all again, and I'll see y'all next time.